Hello, 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 hello. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, wherever you are in the world or whatever time you'll be watching this video. So, guys, just a little bit of political news. So, in a move that he said he would never do, President Joe Biden has pardoned his son, Hunter Biden. So the news report says Joe Biden announced the full and unconditional pardon of his son at the end of the Thanksgiving weekend, a time for Americans and all about family. There is no other conclusion, his statement said, than that his son was politically targeted because of who he is. So, despite that claim of certainty, it's a remarkable turnaround for the president following multiple denials that he would pardon his son. So, Hunter was charged because he had failed to disclose on a federal firearms application that at the time in 2018 he was addicted to the white substance, and he was due to be sentenced next week. So his sentencing for separate tax offenses was due the following week. So, of course, President-elect Donald Trump, he had something to say. Trump calls it an abuse and a miscarriage of justice. No, Trump is saying that. However, when we look at Trump's record, right? So when Trump was president, in his 4 years in the White House, from 2017 to 2021, guess what he did? He granted 237 acts of clemency, 143 pardons, and 94 commutations. Now, let us go through Trump's list. His high-profile pardons were Michael Flynn, who was his former national security advisor, who pleaded guilty to lying to the FBI over contacts with a Russian official. Roger Stone, who is a Trump ally, convicted of lying to Congress regarding his attempts to contact WikiLeaks after the website released damaging emails about Trump's 2016 election rival Hillary Clinton. Then we have Paul Manafort, former Trump campaign chairman, who was convicted of financial fraud, alleged Russian meddling in the 2016 US election, and conspiring to obstruct the investigation. We continue. Charles Kushner, who is the father of Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, who is convicted of tax evasion and witness tampering, and recently nominated by Trump as the U.S. ambassador to France. Look at that. We're continuing. Steve Bannon, who is a Trump former advisor, who was charged with fraud related to a border wall fundraising campaign. He was pardoned as one of Trump's final acts in office. So, pardoning someone in a final act in office is, not a surprise. Then we have George Papadopoulos, who is a Trump former campaign advisor, who was convicted of lying to the FBI about his contacts with Russian intermediaries prior to the 2016 election. We have Albert Pirro, who is the ex-husband of Trump ally Jeanine Pirro, who also a Fox News channel host, who was convicted of conspiracy and tax evasion charges. Rod Blagojevich, who is a former Illinois governor who was convicted of corruption for trying to sell Barack Obama's vacated U.S. Senate seat. Trump commuted his sentence. Then we have Lil Wayne, who is a rapper who was convicted on firearms charges. Trump commuted his sentence. We have another entertainer, Kodak Black, who is a rapper who was serving times for weapons charges, also had his sentence commuted. Now let us look at Trump's advocacy-based pardons. We have Alice Marie Johnson, who is a nonviolent drug offender who was jailed for life, whose case was championed by Kim Kardashian. Then we have Crystal Muniz, Judith Negron, and Tenise Hall, who are three women who were serving long sentences for nonviolent drug offenses, whose names Johnson suggested for clemency. We have the military and law enforcement cases. So we have Clint Lawrence, who is a former U.S. Army officer who was convicted of war crimes in Afghanistan. We have Edward Gallagher, who is a Navy SEAL that was convicted of posing for a photograph with a human corpse. And we have Joe Arpaio, who is a former Arizona sheriff who was convicted of contempt of court for targeting immigrants. And we know that whole border wall fiasco. Now we'll look at some other pardons. So these are the remaining list of people who were pardoned by Trump. And this is as reported in The Guardian. And the full list and further information about those who Trump pardoned can also be found on the Department of Justice website. So let us run through the names. Kwame Kilpatrick, Rick Renzi, Randy Duke Cunningham, Dinesh D'Souza, Elliot Broidy, Sholem Wise, Anthony Lewandowski, Michael Milken, Todd Boulanger, Abel Holtz, Kenneth Curson, Casey Erlacher, Carl Andrews Boggs, Dr. Scott Harkonnen, Johnny D. Phillips Jr., Dr. Mohammed Reza Banki, James E. Johnson Jr., Tommaso Butti, Glenn Moss, Avian Sella, John Nystrom, Scott Connor Crosby, Lynn Barney, Joshua Smith, Amy Pova, Dr. Frederick Nahas, David Taman, Dr. Faustina Bernadette, Paul Erickson, Gregory Jorgensen, Deborah Jorgensen, and Martin Jorgensen, Todd Farha, Thaddeus Beriday, William Cale, Paul Behrens, Peter Clay, Patrick Lee Swisher, Robert Sherrill, Dr. Robert S. Corcoran, David Lamar Clanton, George Gilmore, Desiree Perez, Robert Bob Zangrillo, Hillel Namad, Brian McSwain, John Duncan Fordham, William Ed Henry, Randall Duke Cunningham, and this was a conditional pardon, Stephen Odzer, Stephen Benjamin Floyd, Joey Hancock, David E. Miller, James Austin Hayes, Drew Brownstein, Robert Boca, Amir Khan, David Rowland, Jessica Fries, Robert Cannon Robin Hayes, Thomas Kenton Ken Ford, Michael Liberty, Greg Reyes, Ferrell Damon Scott, Jerry Donnell Walden, Jeffrey Allen Conway, Benedict Olberding, Sarita Stibe Martin, Michael Ashley, Lou Hobbs, Matthew Antoine Kennedy, Mario Claiborne, Rodney Nakia Gibson, Tom Leroy Whitehurst, Monsieur Eugene Vernon, Louis Fernando Sicard, Dwayne Phelps, Isaac Nelson, Trey Tavares Kelly, Javier Gonzalez, Douglas Jimal, Eric Wesley Patton, Robert William Cotton, Hal Knudsen Mergler, Gary Evan Hendler, John Harold Wall, Stephen Samuel Grantham, Clarence Olin Freeman, Fred Keith Alford, John Knock, Kenneth Charles Fregoso, Louis Gonzalez, Anthony Dijon, Corvain Cooper, Wei Q Long, Michael Pelletier, Craig Cesal, Darrell Frazier, Lavon Roche, Blanca Virgin, Robert Francis, Brian Simmons, Derek Smith, Jamie A. Davidson, Raymond Hirschman, David Barron, James Romans, Jonathan Braun, Michael Harris, Kyle Kimoto, Shalanda McFarland, Eliyahu Weinstein, John Estin Davis, Alex Ajmi, Noah Kleinman, Tenna Logan, Mary Ann Locke, Jawad A. Musa, Adriana Shayota, April Coots, Carolyn Yeats, Jody Lynn Richter, Christina Bonham Camp, Mary Roberts, Cassandra Ann Kazowski, Lerna Lee Paulson, Ann Butler, Sydney Navarro, Tara Perry, John Harder, Chris Young, Adrian Miller, Fred Dave Clark, William Walters, James Brian Cruz, and Solomon Melgen. So that is a list of Trump's pardons and commutations. And of course, he is having an issue with President Biden pardoning his son, Hunter Biden. Now, let us wait and see when Trump gets in office who he will pardon. And I have a strong feeling that anyone who is affiliated with the January 6th incident, that he's going to be pardoning them. So let's see.